Malaysian Airlines flight MH17 took off from Amsterdam and was shot down over Ukraine near the Russian border. Nearly 300 innocent lives were taken. Men, women, children, infants who had nothing to do with the crisis in Ukraine. Evidence indicates that the plane was shot down by a surface-to-air missile that was launched from an area that is controlled by Russian-backed separatists inside of Ukraine.
In the serene skies of 2014, flight MH17 was tragically ripped from its course over Ukraine, turning a routine journey into a global tragedy. The disaster claimed the lives of all passengers and crew, leaving a cloud of sorrow and disbelief over nations. Amidst the chaos, questions swirled like storms. Who was to blame and why? Join us as we delve into the mystery of MH17, exploring a story marked by loss, intricacy, and the unwavering quest for answers. The Sunflower Field Mystery. On the 17th of July at Amsterdam's Schiphol Airport, 283 people who were going to travel and 15 people who worked on the plane got on a Malaysia Airlines flight. They were all set to go to Kuala Lumpur, but something very sad happened 4 hours later when the plane was flying over the eastern part of Ukraine. A missile hit the plane and it broke apart in the air. The broken pieces fell down into a big field full of sunflowers. This very sad event made many people pay attention to a very bad fight happening in Ukraine that a lot of the world didn't really know much about before. Even though the country of Russia said it wasn't their fault, leaders from Western countries quickly said that the fighters in Ukraine who liked Russia did it. They said Russia helped those fighters. There was a lot of proof that showed the plane was hit by a special kind of missile from a place that those fighters controlled. The leader of Russia, President Putin, said it wasn't their fault and blamed it on Ukraine's capital, Kiev. But a lot of proof showed that the fighters who liked Russia and used a special missile called Buk were the ones who hit the plane. An official said, "I have to tell you that the government in Ukraine is really trying to make us believe their story. They're talking very strongly. But this doesn't seem like just an unlucky accident. It looks more like someone did something very wrong. And I want to say again, this looks more like someone did something very wrong than just an accident. And if that's true, then we need to find who did it and make them answer for it." Then the official gave the chance to speak to Miss Julie Bishop.
In effect, you're saying, that, are you not, that the Russian government is responsible for this?
Well, the Russian Federation must answer how it is that a sophisticated weapon, a Buk missile, was transported from Russia into eastern Ukraine and was used to bring down a civilian aircraft, killing 298 people, and was then immediately taken back into Russia. And we understand now that this missile was fired from an agricultural field which at the time was controlled by the Russian-backed separatists, the Russian-backed fighters.
From the beginning, Australia did a really good job leading an action in the United Nations Security Council. This action was made to protect the pieces of evidence at the place where the plane fell and to make sure that people who were looking into what happened could get there easily and look around without anyone stopping them. They were told not to move or take anything that belonged to the people who died because those things are for their families and can help find out what happened. They were also told to let the bodies be taken back. The United Nations told the people who did this that they will find them and make them answer for what they did. But sadly, even though these were good things to ask for, they were not listened to. The hope that things would go well was not met. Music plays to show sadness and respect. 38 people from Australia were lost in this terrible event, but the country that lost the most was the Netherlands. 193 people from there were vanished. For the people of the Netherlands, this was as big a shock as the very sad day known as 9/11 in the United States. A person who talks about news said, "Think about how scary and sad the last moments of those people's lives were. Did they hold hands with the people they loved? Did they hug their kids tight? Did they look into the eyes of each other for one last time without saying anything? We will never know." The loss of almost 200 people has made a very big sad spot in the hearts of the people from the Netherlands. It has brought a lot of sadness, anger, and a feeling of loss. The unexpected wave of sadness and anger was something even the people of the Netherlands didn't see coming. "What do you mean when you say it's not typical for us?" someone asked, puzzled. "Let me explain," replied the person talking. "In our country, we don't really have a custom of setting aside special days to mourn together. It's kind of like we think telling everyone to be sad together is too much. Usually we believe that each person should deal with sadness in their own way. That's the usual view here in the Netherlands. But this time, everyone was very emotional, which is strange for us because we are usually known for being level-headed, calm, and careful in how we act." A week had passed since the heartbreaking event, and the area outside the airport where flights take off was covered with flowers and messages for those who died. Some flowers were beginning to dry up and lose their color, but the sadness and anger in people's hearts were as strong as ever. "It feels like a bad dream, a really terrible dream," shared a parent who was drowning in sadness. Selena and Rob Friedrichs were mourning the loss of their 23-year-old son Bryce and his 20-year-old girlfriend Daisy.
I want to arrange their funeral. I can't. I don't know where they are. I don't know. I want them back. I want my children back. Look at those people. How beautiful.
Oh my God.
They have to come back.
Give the bodies back.
Mr. Putin, send my children home.
This young pair had been living with Bryce's parents before this tragedy occurred. "It's just awful," Selena shared, heartbroken. "Every corner of our home reminds me of them. There's a memory in every look, every space. It's as if a piece of your very heart has been ripped away." The Friedrichs family had strong ties to Australia, adding another layer to their story. "My husband has family there, a brother and 3 sisters living in different cities, Cairns, Brisbane, and Sydney," Selena explained. "Bryce had his first diving experience in the beautiful Great Barrier Reef near Cairns. The sad thing is, Bryce and Daisy were flying to Bali for a vacation to enjoy diving when this tragedy cut their lives short." While many grieving families preferred to keep their sorrow to themselves, Rob and Selena made a deliberate decision to open up about their deep loss, hoping that it would make a difference in how people see things. "I understand that when bad things happen, it's like the whole world feels it for a moment," Rob said, reflecting on the transient nature of global empathy. "But after a week, something new comes up, and the previous event fades from memory. But for us, this pain isn't over. We don't want people to just move on and forget. We need them to keep paying attention, to keep listening." Selena continued, "And we want people to really see, to understand the depth of our grief, to recognize the wonderful lives that were so cruelly taken. They need to realize the enormity of what happened, to ensure it never happens again." After tragedy strikes, sadness turns into a hunt for the truth. See how one family's loss mirrors the world's heartache. Grief and destruction at the soldier's place. Selena and Rob had been at the airport every time a military plane from Ukraine landed with coffins. They were hoping against hope that this time the plane would bring back Bryce and Daisy. Each time they felt a mix of comfort and fear. Comfort from being close to where their children might finally come home, but fear because they knew there was a chance their children's bodies were still out there, scattered among the wreckage. Rob often said that he could vividly picture the crash site in his mind, haunted by the thought of Bryce and Daisy's remains lying there untouched and unreachable. It was a nightmare that kept playing over and over in his mind. Meanwhile, an army barracks in Hilversum had been turned into a temporary morgue. It became a place where many people came to mourn, to wait, to hope. This was where experts from around the world worked tirelessly to identify the victims of the crash. During a press meeting, a reporter asked Howard, one of the investigators, about the team working on identifying the victims. Howard explained that the temporary morgue was staffed by professionals from many different countries, all brought together by this tragedy. He noted that many of the investigators, especially those from Australia and Malaysia, had previously worked together during the aftermath of the Boxing Day tsunami. Their current task was heartbreakingly familiar, yet uniquely challenging. Another reporter was curious about the challenges the team faced, especially since the recovery of the bodies had been delayed. Howard shared that normally, the investigation would start at the crash site because the position of human remains and personal items often helped identify the victims quickly. However, this time, they hadn't been able to access the site, which made their job much harder. He pointed out that under normal circumstances, they wouldn't identify people based solely on their belongings, but such items could lead to quicker identifications. When asked about the situation on the ground in eastern Ukraine, Howard expressed his frustration. The area was politically unstable, which complicated their work. Even though the situation was far from ideal, Howard was determined that they would still manage to identify the victims. However, he acknowledged that the obstacles had affected the wider criminal investigation. The investigation into the tragedy had been severely hindered from the start. Access to the crash site was initially blocked by pro-Russian forces, and later the situation was made even worse by military actions from the Ukrainian army. Despite these challenges, the teams on the ground remained dedicated to their task. The Australian team, in particular, showed a mix of defiance and disbelief as they navigated the complex and politically charged atmosphere, determined to bring solace to the grieving families waiting back home. When the investigation team arrived at the crash site, they faced immediate challenges. The area was still a battleground, and the investigators were warned not to step into certain areas to avoid interfering with the ongoing work and possibly putting themselves at risk. They were told they could capture footage from the road without entering the paddock, the area of interest. The atmosphere was tense, but there was still a sense of duty among the team members. They understood the gravity of their task, but also the limitations placed upon them due to the surrounding circumstances. However, the initial hope that the situation would improve, that there would be a pause in the fighting to allow for the recovery of bodies, quickly faded. It became clear that the conflict between Ukraine's government, which leaned towards Western ideologies, and the pro-Russian separatists would not pause for the tragedy. The strategy of the Ukrainian government to intensify its military actions against the separatists after the crash was seen in different lights. Dr. Christ Klepp, a military historian, pointed out that from a strategic military standpoint, Ukraine's actions made sense. The end of the Cold War had brought a long period of relative peace, making the sudden return to conflict a jolt for many. But in the eyes of the Ukrainian military, the situation presented a critical tactical advantage. The crash site was located between key areas controlled by the separatists. By moving through this area, the Ukrainian forces aimed to divide the separatist territories, weakening their position significantly. The crash site of MH17 was not just any location. It was situated strategically between the two major separatist strongholds of Donetsk and Luhansk. This was a key area in the ongoing conflict, a piece of land that neither side wanted to relinquish. The expectation for a ceasefire following the tragedy, allowing safe access for investigators, was unfortunately optimistic. Instead, the Ukrainian military continued to press their advantage, seeing an opportunity to make significant gains. This move by Ukraine was not unnoticed. Observers pointed out that the timing of the military push, coming as the international community condemned the separatists for their suspected involvement in the crash, was particularly significant. It seemed to some that Ukraine was capitalizing on the global outcry against the separatists, leveraging the situation to justify their military advances. This perception added another layer of complexity to an already tangled situation, as the battle for public opinion intertwined with the physical battle for territory. The journey to heal brings us across the world. Follow the tough path to bring back loved ones, the war shadows, and the last goodbyes. The sun is rising at 6 a.m. over Eindhoven Air Base in the lower part of the Netherlands. Here, the Australian military is busily preparing a huge plane, known as a C-17, for a flight destined for Ukraine. The plane is being loaded with different items such as vehicles, medical tools, and other necessary supplies. These items are meant to support a group from different countries working in the eastern part of Ukraine, a place affected by war. Their mission includes a sensitive task. They aim to bring back the remains of people who died in a tragic event. During the end of July and beginning of August, these Australian C-17 planes were making trips non-stop from Eindhoven to Kharkiv, which is the second biggest city in Ukraine. The planes, as squadron leader Dean Bolton, an experienced member of the Air Force, shares, can hold up to 60 tons of cargo. When fully loaded, the plane itself can weigh up to 260 tons. It's quite large, with both its wingspan and length stretching to about 50 meters, meaning it can hold a lot of items inside. When asked about the reaction they received from the families of those who had died in the crash, Bolton shared their experience. After landing, the families were allowed to approach and board the plane to meet the crew. The families were grateful for the support, and the situation was emotionally charged, affecting both the families and the crew members. Before being placed on the plane, the remains of the victims were not treated with the proper respect they deserved. However, once in the care of the RAF, they did everything possible to treat the victims with the highest respect and bring them back to the Netherlands, hoping to give them a dignified return. On the 4th of August, just after landing at Kharkiv Airport, the final plane tasked with bringing home human remains departs from Ukraine. However, even as heavy equipment continues to be shipped in for the mission dubbed Operation Bring Them Home, the effort seems in vain. By the middle of the week, the Dutch and Australian authorities decide to halt the mission. The decision is made in the dead of night at Kharkiv after 1:30 a.m., as the teams from different countries start withdrawing. Initially, the Dutch police leave, followed by the Australian Federal Police, as the escalating conflict in the area makes it increasingly dangerous to continue their mission to find and return the bodies. The uncertainty of when or even if the search might continue hangs in the air. The reality is harsh. The ongoing war doesn't pause for the grieving or for recovery efforts. Meanwhile, in Slavyansk, a city in eastern Ukraine, there's a different scene. A festival is taking place, creating a lively atmosphere despite the area's troubled recent history. Overlooking the festivities is a statue of Lenin, a reminder of the city's connection to Russia and its Soviet-era past. The local residents seem to enjoy the performances, but this light-hearted mood contrasts sharply with the underlying tension in the city. Slavyansk has seen significant conflict. It was one of the first cities to be overtaken by forces favoring Russia and had only been reclaimed by Ukrainian forces in early July. Despite the festive mood, there is a palpable sense of danger. Sharpshooters are positioned on rooftops, and military personnel are a common sight throughout the town. 9.3, 2 miles to the south, in the small town of Kramatorsk, the Ukrainian military is getting ready for battle. This wasn't always the case. Not very long ago, this very spot was surrounded by opposing forces, making it a dangerous place to be. But now things have changed. The area has become a secure spot for the Ukrainian soldiers, and for the first time, they've allowed a few journalists to come in and see what's happening. From this base in Kramatorsk, tanks and soldiers are moving out towards where the fighting is most intense. They're currently moving through areas that are considered safe and under their control. However, not everyone here agrees with what's happening. There are people who feel sorry for the opposing side and are upset about the destruction caused by the ongoing battles. In the nearby village of Semenivka, the impact of the Ukrainian military is very clear. The people living there have been directly affected by the fighting, especially by the artillery used by the Ukrainian forces. Semenivka was once controlled by the opposition and was an important path for their supplies. But as the Ukrainian army took back this area, the village suffered a lot. Buildings were destroyed and the place was left in ruins. The damage is evident everywhere, including in the home of Alexander Marinenko and his family. When they came back home 2 days earlier, they found their house badly damaged. Ludmila Krevkova, Alexander's 74-year-old mother-in-law, showed us around. She specifically pointed out the family's cellar, which had been wrecked. It's ironic because cellars are usually where you would go for safety during attacks, but their cellar was destroyed by a bomb. Ludmila was not there when it happened, due to her being in the hospital for a major operation. It was a twist of fate that probably saved her life. Everyone involved in this conflict feels deeply sad and lost. Exactly 3 months ago, a local church community and their pastor experienced something terrible. They were attacked by militants supporting Russia, leading to tragic results. Father Alexander Pavenko, who leads the church, continues to preach about love and forgiveness, an inspiring message considering what he's been through. Tragically, the bodies of his kidnapped family members were discovered in a mass grave outside Slavyansk. Despite the immense personal loss, Father Pavenko remains compassionate. He has one burning question for those who took the lives of his loved ones. He wants to know what they did to deserve such a fate. The pain and heartbreak on each side of this conflict are profound, touching not only the combatants, but also the innocent families caught in the middle, altering lives and communities forever. As the search for peace goes on, the marks of war show deep splits. Step into the zones where each day is a fight for life and honesty. Does Putin mean war or peace? What does the future hold for this conflict? Many people are wondering. At the outskirts of Slavyansk, the scene is tense. Soldiers, heavily armed, meticulously inspect every car and scrutinize every passport at the military checkpoints. These checkpoints have become a common sight throughout our journey in Ukraine, symbols of the growing tensions. Soldiers are on high alert, worried that among the numerous refugees escaping the war, there might be hidden enemies, possibly separatist fighters coming from the east. The roads are filled with vehicles, all crammed with people fleeing the war-torn regions. We find ourselves amidst this mass exodus, aboard buses shaking violently on the devastated roads. These individuals are escaping from Krasny Luch, a place close to the border with Russia in the Lugansk region. This area has become a crucial route for the opposition, smuggling weapons and reinforcements across the border. Among the refugees is Maria, a language student whose education was abruptly halted by the war. "I'm terrified," she confides. "The thought of my country, my home, turning into ruins keeps me up at night. I was studying in Lukanska, but now with the town nearly leveled, I wonder if I'll ever return to my university. The uncertainty of it all is a constant worry." "How do people in your town cope when the bombs fall?" she asks. "The terror is universal," she explains. "When the bombs begin to fall, panic spreads like wildfire. Everyone has the same instinct, to flee, to escape the horror engulfing their lives. Their escape is fraught with danger." Not long after Maria and others fled, another group wasn't as fortunate. They were attacked while trying to reach safety, resulting in tragedy. On the road again, we come across Alina Nikiforova, who alongside her parents, her young daughter, and their overweight cat, is trying to find safety. After a grueling 5-hour drive, they reach the outskirts of Kharkiv, where an emotional reunion unfolds as Alina meets her eldest daughter, Yulia. 2 days pass and we're invited to a family barbecue as they try to find a semblance of normalcy. The setting sun races against their preparation of the meal. Here in the tranquility of a park, the war seems worlds away, but their hometown remains engulfed in conflict, with Ukrainian forces attempting to reclaim it. The family, despite being together, is torn by differing loyalties. Yulia holds strong patriotic feelings for Ukraine, while her mother leans towards Russia. Yet, in this moment, their differences take a backseat to their bond over food and family. They are accomplished cooks, once celebrated in a Ukrainian competition, and despite everything, they extend a warm invitation to share their meal. But the shadow of the ongoing conflict looms large. The very next day, news breaks of a large convoy of Russian trucks heading towards the Ukrainian border, purportedly bearing humanitarian aid. But skepticism abounds. Whether this is a genuine gesture of help or a deceitful ploy remains unclear. The uncertainty of the situation mirrors the uncertainty in the hearts of those displaced by the war, all wondering if they'll ever return to a place they can call home. Is this situation an attempt to challenge Kiev, the beginning steps before an invasion? Or is Putin just testing the patience of Western countries? What is the real goal behind President Putin's actions? The strategy of President Putin seems to be about causing confusion among other nations. By not sticking to a predictable plan, he makes it hard for others to guess his next move. This seems smart because it means he can always stay one step ahead. When people look at Putin, they often think he doesn't have a clear strategy. But in reality, his strategy is exactly that, to remain unpredictable. This keeps everyone else guessing. I believe that Russia is attempting to stop its area of influence from becoming smaller, particularly in Eastern Europe, where Ukraine and others lie. Russia probably wants to stop these countries from leaving its circle of influence. Ukraine, in particular, has already moved away from Russia to a significant extent. Many people in Russia feel that Ukraine is essentially part of their homeland, a core piece that they have lost. However, Russia appears very determined not to let Ukraine escape from its influence completely. Meanwhile, as the Russian leader Putin and Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko were holding discussions in Minsk aiming for peace, NATO was busy collecting proof that Russia was actively invading the independent territory of Ukraine and engaging in direct combat. Reports surfaced stating, new satellite images released today show further evidence that Russian soldiers, armed with advanced heavy weapons, are actively involved within the independent boundaries of Ukraine. The reliance of many Western European countries on Russian natural gas puts them in a tricky situation. This dependency makes them hesitant to strongly criticize Russia. If this reliance did not exist, they would be much more comfortable speaking out. Therefore, this dependence is a significant factor, and it serves as an important lesson. We should avoid being reliant on a partner who does not adhere to the same standards, respect human rights, or follow fair rules. Being dependent on such a partner greatly limits our ability to make independent decisions. After the crash, world politics mixed with deep personal loss. Discover how the aftermath of MH17 affects global ties and personal stories. Holland's oil trouble with Russia. Holland gets a big portion of its oil from Russia, and Russian companies are heavily involved in Dutch oil refineries. Russia is one of the main business partners for the entire European Union, and Holland is particularly important, coming in second after Germany for buying Russian goods. In places like the Rotterdam port and other parts of South Holland, which are super busy spots for trade, about 15% of all the goods that come and go are connected to Russia. If there are sanctions, basically penalties on trade, it could really backfire. These penalties might cause big financial problems, potentially dragging Europe into a serious economic downturn again. It's a big deal for us, you're spot on. We have to think hard about these things because they're major problems. But the thing is, we're at a point where we can't just accept a world where there are no rules that everyone agrees to follow internationally. We're aiming for a world where everyone follows these international laws, not one where only the powerful get to make all the decisions. One evening in Hilversum, a town in Holland, there's a buzz at the studio of a well-liked TV talk show. They're setting up for a special episode dedicated to MH17, the airplane that was shot down. This is the first time they put on a show like this, with family members of the victims, specialists, and first responders all coming together. During the show, the families talk about their deep pain and heartbreak. They share their feelings in a straightforward way. Looking at the wreckage and the crash site, one thing that really stands out is the total disrespect shown there, the shocking mistreatment of the site. This disrespect goes against what we believe as a civilized society, where every life is valued and the loss of any life is seen as a huge tragedy. Normally, in times of conflict, protecting civilians should be the top priority. But in Ukraine, that wasn't the case. It's a sad truth. Rudy Baumer, a well-known journalist from the Netherlands, who was among the first from Dutch TV to reach the crash site, is also there to share his observations. Then there's the grim topic discussed by another guest, who's referred to as the Dark Booker from the Isle of Amsterdam. This person talks about finding items like books, diaries, and personal notes at the crash site, things that normally would be private and not meant for others to see, all scattered and exposed in the open field. Among these personal items, there were also remains of the passengers, which was an incredibly hard scene to witness, especially because of the overwhelming smell, making the tragedy feel even more personal. I also heard from a friend who lost his relatives in the crash. He was texting me, wanting to know what the situation was like at the site. He asked whether the bodies were being treated with dignity and what was happening with their personal belongings. These questions were tough, and while I was there to do my job, I couldn't help but feel the personal impact, especially since people in my own circle were affected by the tragedy. My cameraman, Yoda Santana, was hit hard too. He lost a friend on that plane. This whole experience of reporting was deeply personal and filled with emotion for us. The destruction and loss were overwhelming. But amid all this, Rudy Baumer noticed something unexpected, a vast expanse of sunflowers. What was it like seeing those sunflower fields? The scene felt almost dreamlike. The sunflower fields weren't just near the site where the tragedy occurred. The cockpit had actually fallen right in the middle of one. Surrounded by these vibrant flowers, the contrast between the beauty of the surroundings and the horror of the crash was stark and bizarre. Rudy and his cameraman, moved by the scene, gathered some of these flowers as a tribute to those who had lost their lives. They brought back a large box filled with sunflowers and other plants from around the crash site back to Holland. These gathered flowers were given to Bas Moes, a well-known Dutch artist who specializes in still life photography. So all these flowers came from the site of the accident? Not every single one. While the sunflowers did, the roses came from memorials. There were also thistles and a bit of chamomile mixed in. The sunflowers especially were in various states, showing the cycle of life and death. Originally, Bas was asked to create something to remember Rudy's and his cameraman's friends who died in the incident. But the project grew into something bigger, a tribute to all the individuals who died in the crash. They were at the site, they saw the aftermath firsthand. Bas wants his art to be a response to the tragedy, to turn the sadness into something beautiful, to remind everyone that life is precious and too valuable for such violence. We're all familiar with Van Gogh's famous sunflowers. In this context, using sunflowers becomes even more symbolic, carrying a potent message. This artwork isn't meant to be a traditional symbol of grief, but rather a vibrant celebration of life, embodying hope and the resilience of the human spirit. The image of sunflowers has become a beacon of hope and a reminder of the beauty that exists in the world, urging us to cherish life instead of resorting to violence. Have we come closer to uncovering the truth behind the downing of Flight MH17? Or does the full story remain just out of reach? What do you think about the findings and the ongoing quest for justice? Share your thoughts below and don't forget to like and subscribe for more.